Not only did I not do this, I know who did. I know Scott killed his father. He took my husband, the father of Chris, Emily, and Amanda.
The wife of a prominent Georgia attorney turns on her own son as she learns her fate in court for the death of her husband.
The legislature has spoken, and the penalty for murder is life. The only determination I have is whether I would be with parole or without parole.
Last month, Melody Ferris was convicted for her husband Gary's death.
Everything she said and did in this case not only proves that she committed these crimes, but she did it with malice aforethought and an abandoned, malignant heart. She stood to inherit all of his money. She burned the remains of her husband for almost 39 years in the hopes it would look like an accident. All because she wanted his money and to live a life with Rusty.
They did not prove that Melody knew anything about the existence of life insurance. There's not a single witness who has said Melody knew about the life insurance policies, that Melody knew that she was a beneficiary. In fact, you heard from their own witness, Martha Jane. She said Melody didn't know anything about their finances. She didn't know where the money was. She knew that she had a debit card and that she could use it, and a credit card, and that she could use it, and that Gary tracked her. But she didn't know anything about other than that. She didn't know anything about the life insurance. She didn't know anything about the 401k. She didn't know about the partnership stuff, though, because she called and asked about it. But that's it. If they want to say that money is the motive, then you might want to establish some evidence that the person who's wanting the money even knows the money exists. The only thing that Melody knows about money existing in this trial that is a proven fact is a receipt in her car with $11,000 in the bank account.
In 2018, Gary Ferris's body was discovered on a burn pile in a wooded area on the couple's 10-acre property in Cherokee County, Georgia. Melody initially told investigators her husband had started the fire days before his body was discovered. She told authorities her husband had medical problems, even suggesting her husband of nearly 4 decades could have suffered from a medical emergency or possibly an accidental death. But that theory changed when a bullet was found lodged in Gary's rib bones, and blood was found on the home's basement floors and steps. Investigators also learned while the couple had been together for nearly 40 years, their marriage was far from picture perfect. The two lived on separate floors in their home and hadn't slept in the same bedroom for years. And during the rocky relationship, Melody allegedly began an affair, which she denied. However, the night before Gary's remains were found, investigators say she called her lover, Ray Barton, and told him he's on the burn pile. Melody wouldn't be arrested for her husband's murder until a year later, but it would take 6 years for her to go on trial. When it came time for the jury to hear the case, the state argued the mom of 4 killed her husband for money, saying she's the only one who had the means, motive, and opportunity to kill him.
When you shrink the world in a case like this, husband and wife, wife kills husband, husband dies. The answer to the question, who did it, sits right there. Melody Walker Farris.
While the defense seemingly pointed their fingers at Melody's son Scott for the murder.
You're going to see from the evidence in this case, from day one, the investigation by Detective Hayes and all of the other officers in Cherokee County Sheriff's Office, even the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, the GBI, everything that was done in this case was tailored specifically to attempt to convict Melody of the death of Gary Ferris. One big thing you're going to hear, and you're going to hear it a lot, is Scott Ferris. You are going to hear the 911 call here shortly. That's the first thing we're going to do. I'm going to play you the 911 call. 13 minutes after law enforcement arrives, Scott Ferris is already blaming his mother. He knows nothing. They're not even sure if there is a body on the burn pile. They're not even sure it's Gary. He's already planting the seeds of blaming his mother. 13 minutes. And law enforcement took that into their beliefs. And then they focused their evidence on that. And that is confirmation bias. Now, you heard Mr. Fogus talk about the Ferris wheel, and I'll talk about it too. But this was a turbulent family.
During her trial, all 4 of her children took the stand. Her son Scott was one of 3 of Melody and Gary's children who testified for the state, and he was adamant he had nothing to do with his father's murder.
Did you murder your father?
I absolutely did not murder my father. Without a doubt, I loved him.
Look at me. Did you have anything to do to help your mother dispose of and burn your father?
Absolutely not.
Tell them, not me.
No. Like I said, I love my father. He was the backbone. He was the glue to our family.
But there was one Ferris sibling who was on their mother's side, Melody and Gary's youngest daughter, Amanda, who believed her mother was innocent.
She has always maintained her innocence?
Correct. We've had some serious conversations, and the story remains the same.
You mentioned, it sounded like you were kind of trying to do your own investigation into this case 6 years ago. Is that kind of what it...
At the beginning,
Right.
And then I lost. You can't do anything when you don't know anything. And I grew up, and I understand that I can't control everything, and God's will is God's way. And that's it.
But also, is it fair to say that you felt like nobody was questioning you, asking you what happened?
Nobody wanted to talk to me.
Until somebody who used to be in the district attorney's office spent 4 hours with you.
Yeah, he came out of his way to come up to Hall County to talk to me and my husband.
And you felt like you were finally heard
Yes.
years after this incident took place.
I was in 2020. I was pregnant with my son, yeah.
Until now. This is really your first chance to finally be heard in front of this jury.
Yes.
Do you feel like you said everything you needed to say?
There's just so much pain. There's no good outcome. He's never coming back. He'll never be there again. And that's just the worst part about it all. And knowing that my mother could potentially spend the rest of her life in prison is terrifying. But again, everybody, you have to follow the evidence, and you have to do what you do. And I'm sorry, y'all have to do this. I'm sorry.
When the jury was handed over the case, they deliberated over the course of 3 days, even coming back deadlocked at one point. But they ended up making a final decision.
We, the jury, as the count 5, we find the defendant guilty. We, the jury, as to count 4, find the defendant guilty. We, the jury, as to count 3, we find the defendant guilty. We, the jury, as to count 2, find the defendant guilty. And we, the jury, as to count 1, find the defendant guilty.
But last week, the Georgia mother learned her fate. The state presented a video of Gary Ferris with his granddaughter that brought Melody to tears.
Girl, that's how you is. Look against the square, girl. You don't stand up for me. Huh? Yeah. I know.
She doesn't tell me.
Had a rough day.
Who was the child?
Olivia, his granddaughter, Emily Payne's daughter.
Right. Okay.
And that was from May of 2018. And then, Judge, this is just a photo. States Exhibit 2 that we'd like to put into evidence as well.
While Melody's children all testified during her trial, they chose not to speak for the victim impact statements. Instead, Gary and Melody's daughter Amanda submitted a written victim impact statement on behalf of the whole family, which was read by the prosecution.
Your Honor, since our father was taken from us, our lives have been filled with an unbearable void. Every day feels like a constant reminder of what we have lost. Gary was a father, grandfather, brother, uncle, friend, and colleague to many. We miss his laughter, his warmth, and his presence in our lives. It's a pain that will never go away. Gary was not just our beloved father, but our confidant and our rock. Now we are left to navigate life without his guidance and support. Every milestone, every happy moment is tainted by the thought that he will not be here to share it with us. There will be no more birthday parties, backyard gatherings, holiday celebrations, or other family activities to share together. Those opportunities to say I love you are forever gone. Our family is forever broken from this tragedy. This loss is only made worse by the betrayal of trust we feel for our mother. To know that the person who caused the suffering to our family was someone we relied on the most is a wound that may never heal. Our children are now growing up without their big daddy and grandma. The impact on their young lives is devastating. They ask questions we cannot answer, and we often find ourselves lost for words when they ask why they don't have a grandmother or grandfather. We ask this court to consider the gravity of this crime, the devastating impact it has had on our family, and to ensure that justice is served. No sentence can ever bring our father back, but a just punishment can offer a semblance of closure and prevent another family from experiencing this unimaginable pain.
David Thomas, a friend of Melody, spoke to the court in defense of his friend, saying she's innocent.
I saw the kindness you showed myself along with other people around you. I know your story always remained the same and it never changed. And in my heart of hearts, I believe in your innocence. For I would not be here today along with our friend in spirit, Alan, who is fighting this horrible disease called cancer as we speak. Third, Your Honor, this is my friend Melody. Melody Walker Farris, whom I come before you today on her behalf as a friend to ask you for mercy. I ask you for grace. I ask you for leniency upon your decision of her sentencing. Gary's death was a horrible tragedy, and there is no excuse for murder on any level. But to convict someone and sentence them for life is even more of a tragedy in itself, especially if it is the wrong person, and especially if all of the evidence was not able to be presented to the jury as a complete investigation should have been brought forth. There were a lot of holes in this case and a lot of unanswered questions. I don't know who's responsible for Gary's death. I know the jury did the best they could with the information that they had to work with, Your Honor. But there were doubts, and there still are for many of us in this case today. I don't know who will have to live with that burden for the rest of their lives, but in coming to know Melody, I cannot believe she is the one responsible for her husband's death. And if
Judge, I'm going to object. He cannot impeach the verdict. That's improper statement. He can talk about it affects him and the family, but he cannot impeach the verdict.
I'm going to let him go ahead.
If I gave you a roadmap and tore it in half and expected you to reach a decision in this case without all of the information, that would not be fair to anyone, including Gary, if the wrong person was convicted. Thank you for your time.
Melody's attorney asked the judge not to sentence her to the maximum sentence of life in prison, as he argued it could be a death sentence for her.
We will be asking the court to ask count one, sentence Ms. Ferris to life with the possibility of parole. Ask to count 4, 10 years concurrent, and ask to count 5 years concurrent, both to count 1. You can see that once a person gets over the age of 65, their presence in the prison system dwindles dramatically. Melody is currently 63 years old. Any sentence really that this court gives, if it gives her life with the possibility of parole, with the current restrictions on parole eligibility being at 30 years for this sentence, is essentially a death sentence for Ms. Ferris. Before even being eligible and not guaranteed parole after 30 years, that would make her 93 years old. before she's eligible for parole. And looking at the female population of the current Department of Corrections, there are currently, at her age, only 11 females currently in custody in the state of Georgia. If you go 10 years from that, you get to 74. There is one, and there are no females older than 74 currently housed within the Department of Corrections. Based on that, Judge, and the facts of the case as the court heard them, there's a reason for this to be a trial and to be such a long trial. I think that there was some doubt, especially with the jury stating that at one point they weren't hung and they coming back with a verdict. And we respect the jury's verdict, although we do not agree with it.
However, the prosecution argued for life without parole, arguing her age shouldn't be considered a factor, given she's the one who committed the crime and tried to toss the blame at her own children.
Judge, a jury has already convicted Walker Farris of all of the crimes in this indictment. They did not find doubt in this case. They did not see the holes. They saw the picture as clearly as Mr. Fogus, Sergeant Hayes, and I did, and the family. I want to start by talking about the aggravation in this case. I think it's pretty clear the jury convicted her of concealment. And within that concealment, the facts were that she burned his body to 33 pounds of a 300-pound man. And the facts in this case also made it clear that she wanted him found. She watched Amanda and Scott both walk by the burn pile. Amanda even tossed something in there, waiting for someone to find his remains, because she is not stupid. She knew a body needed to be found. So she pointed out to Scott, strategically, her child. She made her children find this body. Their father burned up in a burn pile. The granddaughters were on the property looking for him. The fact that she used the children and Lake Lanier as an attempted alibi, it's deplorable. Walker Farris has a depraved mind. That's aggravation. And then throughout the investigation and the trial, continues to blame her children for this death, for this murder of their father and the grandfather of their grandchildren. She tainted and tarnished her children's relationships, not only with each other, but tried to drag their relationships with their father through the mud when they had nothing but love and respect for him. She successfully divided her family, isolating Amanda, and it's all for her own selfish motive.
While declining to testify in her own defense during trial, Walker Farris did choose to speak during her sentencing, but echoed the shocking claim her defense attorney made that her son Scott was responsible for her husband's death.
On July the 5th, 2018, 6 years, 5 months ago today, began the worst nightmare that I could have ever imagined. Not only my world, but my family's world was absolutely destroyed at the hands of one person. I have had 6+ years of being told not to talk. Don't say that. Take legal advice. I could walk out of this courtroom today and drop over dead. I want to make sure that my children, my grandchildren, and Gary's family, and to be honest, at this point in time, the entire world who has viewed this, I have waited for years to make this statement to everyone. I want the world to know who did this. I have always heard that the courtroom is the last place you're going to get the truth. And has that ever been proven to be the truth in this case? Not only did I not do this, I know who did. I know Scott killed his father. He took my husband, the father of Chris, Emily, and Amanda. He took Big Daddy from our grandchildren, Ella, Addison, Olivia, Jax, and James, 3 of them who never got to know Gary. Scott, this is unforgivable. Scott, I have spent an entire life of loving and protecting you, but this I refuse to cover for you. My mother, your mom, begged me to take the blame for this. She said after she talked to you, after Gary died, that she knew you had done it. Her exact words were, "You are his mother. You have to take blame for this." And I told her no, that I couldn't. I still have 3 other children, grandchildren, and this is not a stolen credit card, a check, or a diamond ring that you've pawned, all of which you have done. I saw you coming from that burn pile the morning of July the 5th in your truck. You told me that you were checking on the fire to make sure that it wasn't going to get the woods on fire. You told me it was okay. I asked you a few weeks later why you were at that burn pile in your truck, and you told me that your dad had told you to clean up the extra wood that was by the barn. I told Hayes that I had seen Scott that morning coming from the burn pile. So, Hayes, where is that recording? I want to know. You told me there was multiple recorders. You did, but you sat here in this courtroom and you told this court that you didn't tell anybody about recorders, but you did. Where is that recording in the interview? You, Scott, immediately started saying that there was a gun missing, a gun that nobody knew about. You never mentioned before. I asked you more days than not where your dad was, and this was the first time you ever had that response. There's a gun missing.
Melody's speech got to the point the judge even had to step in.
Ms. Ferris, really not supposed to go into the evidence of this phase of the case. And what I typically do is if the defendant wants to go into the facts of the case, I'm going to allow the state to cross-examine or ask questions, which I don't really anticipate you want to do.
I would just ask to close, Judge.
Your statements needs to be constrained to the punishment, and if there's things you want to talk about in relation to that and how I should sentence you, I don't have a problem if you want to continue to profess your innocence, but we're not going to go on for a significant period of time. You resuscitate your view of the case and your opinion as to what the evidence is without your prior testimony and without the state being able to cross-examine it. It's not proper. So I'm going to ask you to restrain your remarks to comply with those directions.
Judge, this needs to be known.
Well,
I'll just ask to respond, Judge.
all right.
When she continued her speech, Melody's sons Chris and Scott continued to appear speechless while sitting in the gallery.
I went to feed the baby goat the morning of July the 5th before I left for the lake. I saw where you had washed out the barn. I later found that several bottles of house wash were missing after this all happened several weeks ago. Now I know why. The photos of your bathroom spotlessly clean. Now I know why. I know why you demanded me to move the tractor that you so were upset about it being in the place. Now I know why. Scott, you called me on July the 4th and asked me what my plans were for the day. And I told you I was going to the lake with Amanda, and you were so glad that I was going. I thought it odd then. Now I know why. I found copies of my birth certificate, your dad's birth certificate, our marriage license in your truck. Now I know why. Scott, I saw Gary going to that barn the night of July the 3rd, right after you got home. And then Scott is going, and I thought then Scott's going to be in trouble for staying at the lake and playing golf all the time. Never in a million years did I ever think that this nightmare was starting then. I told you, Detective Hayes, that I saw Scott going over there to the barn. Where is that in the recording? A bag. I know exactly where and when I was standing. Scott, you put antifreeze under my kitchen sink to set me up for this. That only you would have known where it was because it was for the Mercedes. When Amanda and I were putting that house back together, you sat in there and watched us like a hawk. Now I know why. You became so angry when the fire investigator came in July, weeks after this nightmare started. Now I know why you were so angry. Scott, you failed your polygraph test. You recorded meetings at the attorney's office and turned them over to the DA's office. We hired Manny to help us. Emily is the one who used her daddy's credit card to pay for that attorney. Scott, you got so angry that your sister Amanda was getting my personal clothes and my personal things to the point that Cherokee County had to be called. That is not the actions of the same person. Scott's anger issues have all been a huge issue. When he was in kindergarten and elementary school, Chris would...
I'm objecting. At this point, she's dragging Scott through the mud and his character. This is not...
Melody claims she was always there for her children, but she continued vilifying her sons.
I am the mother that was always there for my children, even though they had done things that were wrong. Chris, who took care of your girls and loved them if they were my own, who came and got them off the street when you were acting an absolute fool because they were scared to death, who drove down to Buckhead and got your children.
Now I will tell you, okay, so just to kind of give you some direction. Things that are appropriate, you helping take care of your family, raise your family, those kind of things, what you've done throughout your life, and asking the court to exert some sort of mercy on you, things of that nature are appropriate. So you can talk about those kind of things, but let's don't go into the individual facts or things that haven't been previously presented to the court. Okay? All right, go ahead.
I love Ella and Addison more than life itself. And it was their life or mine. It would be mine in a heartbeat. Emily, who helped you move to and from an apartment and a house in 19-degree weather, even though I knew that you were trying to keep it from me. I was always there for you. I came back to you in Thompson Station after your husband was arrested to care for you and Olivia. I am so sorry that your children will never know their Big Daddy. Amanda and Chad, words cannot express my gratitude for everything that you've done for me. Thank you so very much. And I was fortunate enough to get to care for James every day since he was 3 weeks old. He is my pride and joy. Love for that little boy is unbelievable. I spent 18 plus months in the Cherokee County Jail over something that I did not do. The last thing, I thought that was the last thing I could do to Gary, for him, to get justice for him. I can remember thinking, it's okay that I sit here. I just want answers. That's all I want. And I still haven't gotten them. And I don't think that I ever will. And that scares me to death. Amanda was the only one of my children that got up here and told the truth. And I thank her for that.
In her final plea, Melody asked the judge to throw out her guilty verdict.
Judge Cannon, I had so many questions, so many whys. Why were so many things not their task? Why was the barn never checked? I think that would have given us so many answers. Why did they run out of Blue Star? They were on my property for days. I beg of you to get answers. Judge Cannon, I am begging for justice for Gary, for my children, for my grandchildren, for Gary's family. And I am begging that you throw out this verdict. Be the 13th juror. Help us get justice. I did not do this. I promise you on my life. The 18 months that I did in Cherokee County was nothing compared to the last month that I spent in there. Now I know that Cherokee County did not do their job in the investigation. They took Scott's story and ran with it. I know that in my heart, body, and soul, who did this. And I'm begging for help. I'm begging you, Judge Cannon. Please do not send me to prison for something I didn't do. I did not do this. If I had done this, I would take this charge gladly. If it would bring Gary back, I would gladly go to prison. I do not want to wait years for an appeal. I've waited 6 years and 5 months for justice already, but here we are. Maybe I should have testified, but I listened to legal counsel. I wanted the truth out there, and this is why I am making this statement. I will talk to any and everyone who can help me and my family. I never wanted my family's life to be played out for the world to see. It is a mother's job to protect her children, and I cannot protect the person who did this. We can't replace Gary. That is unforgivable. I promise you to work hand in hand with the DA's office. But what scares me the most is that because of several individuals, so many others in this county that did not do their job, justice will never be done. For the last 6 years and 5 months, my every thought has been consumed with this. No matter what I do, it never leaves. And until you have lived this, nobody can understand. And I would not wish this on anybody. When I heard of the mother of the boy at the Appalachia school shooting, she called to tell that her own son was going to the school with a gun. My heart broke for her. This is a mother's worst nightmare. Judge Cannon, I beg of you for help. As one parent to another, help me get justice for Gary and my family. And I plead with you to roll this verdict out. Help me get justice for the correct person. As bad as it sounds, I want to be there to watch him chained and shackled and brought to justice. I plead with you. This is something that I will never recover from. I don't know that my family will ever recover from. Please help me. I'm begging you to restore my faith in the judicial system. I'm begging you, not for me, but for Gary and my children and my grandchildren.
When it came time for the judge to issue his ruling on sentencing, he sided with the defense, but not in the way you would think.
Without going into a lot of detail or my thoughts on it, jury's made a determination that Ms. Ferris was responsible for her husband's death, and she was found guilty of all charges. I don't have much latitude in sentencing. The legislature has spoken, and the penalty for murder is life. The only determination I have is whether it would be with parole or without parole. I don't believe this is the case that justifies a life without parole sentence, so I'm going to sentence to life with parole, or life with the possibility of parole. I don't have any control over parole. That's up to the parole board. Under the current guidelines and sentencing structure with them, a life sentence is a minimum 30 years before you would be considered for parole at this point. I recognize that that is likely a life sentence for you, but you'll have the hope and possibility of parole. She's not to have any contact with family members. I don't know who they would even notify other than the prison. So any members of the family that want to have contact with you may contact you. They'll need to reach out to the warden's office first and let them know that they want to allow you to have contact with them, so you can call out to whoever has given approval to the warden. As far as the other provision, I'm not going to make any condition as to that. That will be something that would be left to a civil court if there is a lawsuit down the road and judgment, etc. So, all right, that being said, court.
While her sentence marked an end to long-awaited justice for Gary's family, Melody and Gary's own children still appeared in disbelief by what she told the court as she was taken into custody. Melody Ferris also received a 5-year sentence for concealing her husband's death and 5 years for making a false statement. But those sentences will run concurrently or at the same time as her life sentence. The earliest time Melody could be eligible for parole, she'll be in her 90s. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.